Good day and welcome to Gen Con. I am here as your host, Cindy Munoz, and I'm also here with Piazo.
Hi, I'm Logan Bonner. I'm one of the designers at Piazo Incorporated.
And I hear there's some exciting things that are happening here at Gen Con.
Yes, we're launching the second edition of the Pathfinder role-playing game. The game's been around, first edition for 10 years, so this is kind of a big milestone. And this is the first release, and we're getting our first reviews and our first reports and people playing the game in its final version.
Awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Since I'm sure a lot of the people that are going to be interested in watching have already been playing Pathfinder, or maybe new people want to find out about what's going on with the second edition also.
For sure. So the Pathfinder is a fantasy role-playing game. It's kind of a lot of character options, a lot of customization, a lot of kind of tactical play, really involved world, a setting that, again, has been building for over 10 years at this point. And the new version of the game, we've kind of made easier to pick up and play, and really flexible. You can get really creative with it. You can have interesting narratives. We've kind of put more of the GM control kind of back into the game, and really focused on making it one where you can tell the story you want to tell without the rules getting in the way, and have a whole bunch of different tools at your disposal to tell your stories and have a good time at the table with all your friends.
Awesome. Now, is second edition going to be something that a newcomer can pick up and be able to kind of read and understand what's going on?
Yeah, we put a lot of work into making it more new player friendly.
Okay.
The first edition kind of came out of 3.5 D&D, and so a lot of the fans who adopted it had already been playing that game for several years at that point. And we really wanted to make sure that, like, if you hadn't played Pathfinder, you could pick up this game and get started right away. So we have a really nicely detailed introduction and a step-by-step character creation process that's really going to guide you through everything. And we've also made the rules themselves much easier to use. So when you're in an encounter, you have 3 actions that you can use for whatever you want, basically. So the older version and some other games kind of say, like, well, you can use this action, this type of action for this, and this type of action for that. And we've really said, look, do what you want to do on your turn. You have this many actions to get it done in, but you can be really flexible about how you play out your turn.
So there's a little bit more room to pretty much enjoy the game without having to focus on too much of the what's the word, like the dynamics of how things have to kind of go and flow together, pretty much.
Right, yeah, you don't have quite as many restrictions.
I see.
And you can kind of say, like, well, what I really want to do, I want to try to, pull this lever and see what happens. But in Pathfinder 1, it might have been like, well, it's going to take my whole turn to pull that lever and see what happens. So I'm going to do something that's more certain. Like I'm going to cast a spell and leave that lever alone. And we'll find out what that does later, hopefully, if we survive. And in this edition, you can spend 2 actions casting. Most spells take 2 of your actions, so you spend 2 actions casting that spell. But you still have an action left. And you're like, all right, I'm going to pull that lever.
Okay.
So it really means that you have a little more room to improvise and to get creative with it.
Oh, that sounds awesome because of the fact that you don't have to worry about, well, do I want to waste this doing this action?
Yeah.
And you can kind of have more fun with it. I like that. Awesome. Can you show us a little bit of what's going on inside the core book? I'd love to see the new one.
So the book has a cover by Wayne Reynolds, who's been kind of the main Pathfinder artist, does all our covers and does the illustrations of our iconic characters. He's been working with the company for a long time. So it's a beautiful, like, red dragon, and this is fighting a cleric, a ranger, and a rogue. And then inside the book, the first thing you're going to hit is that introduction I was talking about, which is going to tell you everything about making a character. This is the character creation section here. So you can see it's got, like, nice big steps. So first you create your character concept. Here's the list of the ancestries of the book and the classes in it. So you can play a dwarf, elf, gnome, goblin, halfling, or human. If you're a human, you also have these heritages, which are kind of like sub-branches and are based on, a lot of times, like your kind of starting state as a character. So humans can also be half-elves or half-orcs. Or there are a couple options if you're just a human that are kind of like represent human versatility.
Okay.
Whereas some of the other ancestries, like an elf might be a woodland elf or that sort of thing.
So there's variations.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations. And I'll show you some of those in the ancestries in a second here. Okay. You also have a list of all 12 classes that are in the book. Pathfinder 1 had 11 of these, and it also had not all of these ancestors because we've added the goblin to the game. Pathfinder's goblins are kind of fun little very eager, we'll say.
Can we show
Ancestry.
everybody the picture of the goblin really quick? Because the goblin is awesome.
So this is the goblin alchemist Fumbus, who's very excited to probably light something on fire.
Thumbus looks so cool.
It's a good thing he has the goggles, or he might be in trouble. And Fumbus is an alchemist. We've added the alchemist to the book for the first time. It was in a later book in first edition.
Okay.
But we really wanted to say we need to do alchemy a little differently than we used to, and we want to make it a full part of the main game. So alchemy, alchemical items, and the alchemist class are all in the core rulebook now. The remaining classes are the barbarian, the bard, the champion, the cleric, the druid, fighter, monk, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, and wizard. The champion is kind of a different concept because a lot of people are familiar with paladins. We had they're in a lot of games, and they're in Pathfinder First Edition. And we kind of said, well, what if you don't want to be lawful good and you want to kind of have a different cause than the cause of the paladin? So we expanded it to the champion, and now you can have the chaotic good liberator or the neutral good redeemer, which are kind of different paths along the same type of kind of like heavily armored champion of a deity.
Kind of like an MMA fighter. Like there's the different types of MMA fight. That's awesome.
So those are kind of the main character options you're going to have. Then this is the Ancestries chapter. So the Ancestries I kind of went over before, and we're going to flip to the goblin to kind of give a example of the heritages I was talking about. So when you're a goblin, you can take the Charhide goblin, which is going to help you against fire, the Iron Gut goblin, which means you can kind of eat whatever you want, the Razor Tooth goblin, which will give you big pointy shark teeth.
Yeah.
The Snow goblin, kind of from Arctic environment, and then the Unbreakable goblin, which is kind of like you're a little more cartilaginous. If you fall off something, you'll probably just bounce. That kind of thing. So,
that's cool.
And you get that ancestry at first level. You also get ancestry feats, because we kind of said, what if you want to kind of expand some of the things, not just of your class, but of your ancestry? And so you have a bunch of options that are really themed to the ancestries. So if you are an elf, you're going to get some things that kind of make you more steeped in elven culture and elven specialities.
Yeah, what I have to say is the goblin, the different types of goblin, that's new. I've never seen anything like that. That is really cool that you guys came up with something completely different, like that could give people not just your typical goblin, but now they have these different variations of goblins to choose from.
Right. We wanted to kind of say, like, well, here's the basics of it, and if two people are playing goblins, there's still a little bit of interesting variation between them, but they still both feel like goblins.
Oh, I like that.
Then after the ancestries, we have backgrounds. So we call these the ABCs of character creation, because you pick your ancestry and then your background and then your class. And so your background is going to give you a little bit more of your. It's basically your ancestry is how you were born. Your background is kind of what you did as you grew up and came of age. And there's a wide selection of them. So you can be like a merchant or a martial disciple, which is someone who like went to a monastery and studied fighting techniques. You could have been a prisoner or a scholar. There's a whole bunch of options for those. You can see that they're relatively short. So this is kind of like one of the smaller pieces of your backstory, but it's going to give you some skills, and it's going to help you determine your ability scores to see what kind of things you're best at.
Yeah, the way that you guys have that set up really feels like you can get that true immersion with your character and really bond with that character. And just like even us as humans, you have the background before and then your birth, and it kind of leads on to who you are now. And that's...
Right, and then that's going to culminate in your class. This is kind of the last step. It's like, well, now I'm an adventurer. Why do I go adventuring? What's my my preferred method of playing the game? Adventuring, exploring, and fighting, and all that. Like, what do I really get into the most? Right. And so this is the barbarian. So if you want to like just be a badass and go smash things, the barbarian is kind of the class for you. The ABCs. Also, the thing I found is, you want to start with a character concept, but even if your character concept is like very brief and you don't just have the basics of details, picking that ancestry and the heritage and then picking the background is going to start telling your story and building out some details of your character, even if you didn't go in with 3 pages telling your story before you became an adventurer. You still are going to kind of get that just through the character creation process.
Oh, okay.
And I've made pre-generated characters to run this at conventions and stuff, and it's like, oh, I get a really great idea of that character, even though I had like very little to start with. I know a lot about them just from going through the character creation.
I've had to make a couple pre-gens myself for other games, and I don't know about you, but I tend to take people from my life and kind of make them into a character.
Yeah. A lot of times I'm playing with the people I know best, so I'm like, well, they're probably going to figure out if I make this character be exactly like Rodney, I probably shouldn't do that.
I think it's kind of funny when they figure it out, too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is the cleric, and you can see we've also added a new option to the cleric where you can choose a path where you're either a cloistered cleric or you're a war priest. So if you want to be the priest who wears a bunch of armor, you can be the war priest. If you want to be kind of like I'm wearing robes and primarily casting spells, you can be the cloistered cleric.
Okay, so as most games with those type of differentiations of clerics, one of them's more, they get to go into battle a little bit more, while the other one's more the support and kind of just standing in the back to help heal up the team.
Or support, or even some could be, depending on some of their choices, they could be more like a blaster cleric.
Ooh, cool, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of the basics of the game that most characters are going to end up with. There's also a big selection of skills and skill feats and that sort of thing. And as you go up in level, one of the things we wanted to do with this edition, again, to make it kind of friendlier for new folks entering the game, is the characters follow a similar progression in how they build up. So they each get a class feat at every other level, and they get class features at the other levels. So those are going to be unique to the class, those feats.
Okay.
So there's still going to be a lot of variety. So once you know how you make a character and how you level up with that character, if you go and want to play a new character with a different class, it's going to follow the same structure. But you're going to find that while you're building the same, they do very different things. So like the Barbarian, one of her feats might be one that lets her rush into combat and smash somebody. So there's one called Sudden Charge that is it takes 2 actions, but you essentially get 3 actions out of it because you move double your speed and you smack somebody.
Oh, that's a nice little add-on there.
Yeah. But then the cleric might have I'm going to get some more special focus spells that are tied to my deity. And so you're both picking feats, but if you look at that selection of feats, they're really different and they play really differently. And they might not all be, they're not necessarily all combat feats. You might be getting some things that help you explore better or interact with people better. And that's kind of we want that flexibility. We don't want all the classes to feel really samey. And we want people who want to engage in the game in different ways to all have a place and some options for those.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you guys took too much away. It sounds like you guys just made it a little bit more simple, and then you added some of the extras to kind of make it more optional for different types of things, whatever the player wants to.
And also to take it for people who've been playing Pathfinder 1 for 10 years, so that they have some new stuff to look at. And for example, the sorcerer class used to be an arcane spellcaster, and now we've got 4 different traditions of spellcasting, and we said the sorcerer gets to pick one. So they might have some angel blood in their bloodline, and they cast divine spells, or they might have dragon blood and they cast arcane spells, which was an option in 1st edition. And then there's some others they might have the blood of hags and they cast occult spells.
It's my favorite.
So we looked at when we did the playtest, we were kind of let's get this to a basic level, and now this has a lot more expansion from that. So we kind of tweaked some of the rules after the playtest, and we've also just added a whole bunch more stuff and a lot more options.
So Logan, I gotta ask you, what is your favorite to play? Who's your favorite build that you've made for yourself?
There's so many options. I think one of the classes I worked on is the monk. And I really like a lot of the options for the monk because you can do these fighting stances. So you enter tiger stance, and it gives you a special attack that you can use. You kind of claw people with your hands.
Yeah.
And all the stances, you can kind of switch into them if you take multiple ones and change up your fighting style during the middle of the combat. So I think that one's a lot of fun.
Fun.
Yeah. So that's kind of the basics of how the game works. I already kind of talked about the actions and all that. Another thing that we did was the math in Pathfinder 1st edition. It worked differently for skills and for attacks and for AC and everything. It was all kind of built in different ways. And now they kind of use a similar progression. Okay. And it's labeled in untrained, which is you aren't any good at all. Trained, expert, master, and legendary. And those are called the Proficiency Ranks.
Okay.
And that means that you can compare things more easily. So you can be you're an expert at attacking with long swords, and I'm a master in perception. And so we can kind of get an idea like, oh, you're about as good with longswords as I am at searching for things. So it's a little easier to, especially for new folks, to kind of figure out what each of those means.
I see.
Just based on that scale of proficiencies.
And it helps round out better the group that's adventuring together too.
Yeah, and it also, giving it a name like that kind of just makes it make a little more sense in the story, because you don't kind of have to say, well, what does +7 mean, right? You know what being a master means.
I like that you have the tiers named like that. That's it makes it very convenient and memorizing to memorable, I guess you should say, to be able to do, like you said, for the new player. Because I have a really tough time remembering things.
Yeah.
But if you can make it that simple, that helps someone like me who is fairly new. I've played a couple of my fair share of games, but it is difficult to remember. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So.
And one of the things we've been finding with demos and everything is people just take to it like that. Like they sit down, whether they've played a whole bunch of Pathfinder 1 or they're new to the game, they sit down and like you explain the system and they're up and running just immediately and doing all kinds of cool stuff with it.
That's cool.
So we're really happy with that.
Awesome. Is there anything else in the book that you'd like to show us before? Because I want to see some of the other books. You have the
we do have a
artwork
lot of
is
books.
beautiful that I've seen so far
Yeah.
in these books. They're
We've got
gorgeous.
some great design, some great art. So the rest of the book, the core rulebook is everything you need to play or run the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of primarily focused on player options, but there's also the rules for game mastering the game and for giving rewards for the game, and then a whole bunch of magic items and treasure and that sort of thing. So I'll flip to some of the magic items back here to show off some of that art. So here's some weapons. So we've got a lot of kind of classic weapons. We have the Holy Avenger and some stuff like that. You can see the Flame Tongue there, Frostbrand, some kind of classic items. And we wanted to make sure there was a pretty robust selection of things in here. One of the new things in the game is magic items or magic weapons work a little differently. So if you're familiar with, the +1 weapon gives you +1 to hit, +1 damage in first edition. Now it gives you, you can get a +1 striking weapon, which also does an extra die of damage. So as you're going up in level, in first edition you would tend to get a whole bunch more attacks. So it'd be like, all right, I'm rolling 8 dice, and I expect maybe 3 of these are going to hit, and the rest are pretty iffy. But now it's kind of like, because you're doing more damage, you're going to be doing fewer things, but you're more likely to succeed with them.
That's kind of one of my things. I'll roll big number for the
Yeah.
attack, and then all of a sudden you go to roll damage, and it's lower, and you're like, oh, okay. But that makes you feel a little bit more special as the player.
Well,
I
I also have some good news for you on that front, because we've also introduced a system called the 4 degrees of success. So if you're usually in first edition you'd have success or you'd have failure.
Okay.
Now we've kind of said, if you beat the DC by 10, you're going to get a critical success. So we've kind of taken that concept of the critical success and kind of expanded it out. Instead of just rolling a 20 and getting a critical, now if you exceed by 10. So for some characters, that's going to be, they're going to be critically succeeding on a 19, an 18, maybe even a 17 on certain things. On the other side, there's a critical failure if you fail by 10.
Right.
Which
It's gotta
really
be the other side always, right?
Yeah, exactly. And usually most of the time you're going to be in those middle bands, but sometimes you can get those outer bands, and it's really satisfying to get kind of more out of it.
Yeah.
And this let us do a couple things. And I should mention, rolling a natural 20 on the die, you're going to increase your success by 1 step.
Oh,
So
cool.
if I can't exceed by 10, even rolling a 20, I still get to increase to a critical success because I rolled that 20.
And that gets people at the table just screaming,
Yeah, exactly. And rolling a 1 does mean you're going to drop your success down by 1. So even if you're the best in the world, if you roll a 1, you might only succeed instead of critically succeeding. So
It's all about the emotions at the table, you know. That's where it's all at.
Yeah. And there are a lot of emotions at the table when someone gets a critical success or a failure. And that skill lets us do a couple things. One is that spells, a lot of like save or die or save or suck spells meant I'm going to cast a spell, and either that enemy is totally screwed and out of the fight, or I did nothing. Because if they succeed at their save, nothing happens to them. If they fail, I might paralyze them for a long time or something.
I see.
What this 4 degree system lets us do is kind of say, well, they succeeded, but we can put a little bit of an effect on there. If they critically succeed, then nothing happens to them. So you're more likely to have gotten something out of your spell.
Okay.
And on the other side, the failure is kind of the normal bad effect. We can say, like with that paralysis example, we might say, they get paralyzed briefly, right? Like maybe for one turn or something like that. If they critically fail, then you've really lucked out, and now they're paralyzed for a long period of time.
Oh.
So, it means that we can make those spells that previously were just kind of like, well, either the wizard's going to end the fight or the wizard's going to waste their time.
Right.
Now it's going to be part of the progress of the fight either way.
It sounds like you guys are really working on that balancing within the adventure team and against the NPCs and everything.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a more of a balance is what's going on in the second edition.
Yeah, we're trying to make it so that things aren't quite as feast or famine. And a lot of that with the spells is kind of taking and saying, you know, we want these spells to get better and cooler, but we also don't want to make it so that the game you're playing is totally different from the game you started out playing.
Right.
The other thing that we get to do with the critical success and failure is it's incorporated into kind of all parts of the game. Not everything is necessarily going to have this critical failure effect. For example, if I critically fail in an attack roll, I still just miss. I didn't like drop my sword or anything like that.
Right.
Because sometimes you end up just looking like a complete klutz and weirdo, even though you're an incredible sword master. But the things where we think there's something really compelling that we can do with a critical success or failure, we do. So, for example, in some of the skills, if I succeed at trying to remember something about this monster, I get a certain amount of information. If I critically succeed, I get even better and more information. If I fail, I don't learn anything. If I critically fail, I might know some information about that monster that's not exactly accurate. So, which means that the story can kind of go in some interesting twists and turns that way.
Yeah, I like that viewpoint of it, to be able to say something like not having the right information, which that's life.
Yeah. And we wanted to make sure the system had a little more risk and reward. The original system, I think we felt, had a little too much certainty. You could get a really high skill bonus, for example, and it's just like, well, I never have to worry about this, which could kind of cause the drama to stagnate sometimes. So we wanted to make sure that that if you're making a roll, it still matters. It doesn't feel like it's a foregone conclusion as much. And we've really found, so in one of the playtests we ran, Jason, the director of game design at Piazo, was playing a character who found this kind of basin and is like, oh, I'm going to try to identify this. And he rolled a 1. And we have a concept called secret checks, so the GM is kind of meant to roll them in secret. So I'm like, well, that's a 1 that Jason got. Jason, this basin is a healing potion. So Jason drinks it and finds out later that they kind of needed that to sanctify something. And weirdly enough, his wounds didn't heal, so he found out pretty quickly. And that was, for his character, maybe that's a little sad. At the table, it was really fun. And everybody just kind of started.
Well, I have to say, for the DMs that are playing this, that's a really exciting point for the DM, because they don't have to just stick to what they're reading, and they get to actually do a little bit of the playing themselves and kind of mess with the players and by the rule of the dice.
Yeah, and that was one of our big goals for on the GM side of things, was to kind of say, we want to give you more flexibility, and we want to make sure that you're having some things that are really fun for you to do as well.
Because I have gotten, not just with you, but other games where DMs, they kind of start to get bored and they're like, I want to play too, but this kind of gives them now a little bit more of, they feel like they're sitting with their friends also as a player, but leading their friends, their adventuring friends into this world.
Yeah. One of the other things we did to make things more fun for the GM, we're going to look at another book now. That's the Bestiary. So the Bestiary is our big monster book. And we've overhauled how monsters work and given them a lot more kind of interesting abilities. So some monsters that before were kind of just like, it will attack you. That's kind of all it's good at. This was especially true of animals and kind of not very intelligent monsters. We've given them abilities to kind of say, well, how do we want the fight with this, leopard to go? And we kind of given them more abilities to make them feel more dramatic and to better convey kind of the story of what that fight would be like. You can kind of see here some of the layout of the monster book, which we're also really happy with. One of the really cool things I like in here is that we have these sidebars. So this text here kind of describes what the monster is all about and its place in the world. Then we have a stat block for it. We have the art for it. But we also have these sidebars, which are just kind of like whatever we think is really interesting that doesn't necessarily fit in one of those other places. So this one has suggestions for what happens when a doppelganger can change its shape and look like anyone. What happens when they infiltrate a party? So this kind of gives the GM some hints of like, okay, here's how you might play this if you're having a doppelganger kind of try to replace somebody.
Oh, that's fun.
And some of the other ones, since it can be about anything, some of them are like, here's kind of some treasures that it has, or how it interacts with certain groups, or just some weird little rumor or fairy tale about this creature that you can just kind of use in your game.
So sometimes what you're saying pretty much is that it doesn't always have to be the same. If you play again that same adventure, it's going to be different, not just by the players but for the DM himself. Yeah. That's an amazing experience to have.
So here's one that I think has some good examples of all the things I was just talking about, and that's the Mimic. So the Mimic can make itself look like anything. We've illustrated it as a chair here, in the moment of it revealing that it's actually a weird creature. So it's got an ability, it's adhesive, so it sticks to you, but it also has an ability called Object Lesson, which is when it is in its form looking like something else and you interact with it, it kind of tells you like how it reacts and how it kind of jumps out and grabs you. So it's kind of that fun moment where instead of just going, okay, you've gotten to the Mimic, now let's roll initiative, you kind of say like, well, it reacts in this way and splurches onto you, and then you roll initiative. We've tried to put a lot of that kind of thing in there to kind of say like, well, here's this cool moment of drama that we can foresee happening in the game. So how do we help you make that even more exciting?
Oh yeah, it's like almost like playing a movie out in your head at the table. It's that suspenseful moment.
Yeah, and a lot of it is kind of giving you tools to make that movie
happen at the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can see the sidebar here is about creative mimics, which kind of tells you about like some ways that mimics are relatively smart. So here are some ways they might do some kind of goofy things.
Okay.
That'll make you make them more interesting when they show up. So those are kind of the core 2 books, and those released here at Gen Con. So this is their first, kind of debut. We also have 2 adventures that came out. Hell Knight Hill, which is the first volume of one of our adventure paths. So adventure paths are 6 volumes, and they take you an adventure from 1st level through 20th level, and they're kind of an interconnected story.
Okay.
So that's great if your group is going to be playing for a while.
Yeah.
And if they want to have kind of a significant campaign. They have new character options that will show up just in those adventures. Like the stuff in the core rulebook is kind of for everybody, but if you've played this adventure, your character is going to feel different from every other character because you're going to have some of these options that show up in the adventure.
Oh, okay.
And another good example of that is our standalone module, the Fall of Plaguestone. That one is self-contained. So if you're like, well, I want to try out Pathfinder, I don't know if I want to commit to an adventure path, I want to play just a single adventure. Fall of Plaguestone is a great one there. It kind of tells the story of how your adventuring party came together.
Okay.
And how they gelled as a group. So you kind of start out not really knowing each other, and you have an adventuring party in the course of playing this.
How estimated? How long does that just one standoff adventure normally could take?
Usually they're going to be multiple sessions. And it kind of depends on how many levels they go through. But this is going to get you like several months of gaming in each of those volumes for most people if they're doing like 4-hour sessions, which we kind of is the most typical number we hear. So yeah, it'll get you a pretty good amount of play.
For the standalone also, which for Hell Knight Hill, that's the one you were telling me?
Yeah.
So for Hell Knight Hill, how many levels can someone level up on just the standalone?
This one, I think most of the Adventure Path volumes go through 3 or 4 levels.
Okay.
It kind of depends on the volume.
Okay.
But because it's going to get you a 1 through 20 over 6 volumes, it's usually 3 or 4. But,
Okay.
and most often 4 levels for the early ones and 3 levels for the later ones.
I see. Okay, yeah. And now you guys have you even have character sheets that you guys made for...
Yeah, and this is our character sheet pack. You can get the character sheet online on our website. There's the full color version and then a printer friendly version. And then this one has the basic character sheet, and it's kind of got expanded pages for like more space for writing up equipment, more space for writing in spells. It's kind of an extra sheet. There's a sheet for your animal companion if you're like a druid with an animal companion.
Yeah.
And there's one sheet for each class with information pre-filled in there. So if you want to just start playing a cleric, it's already got your basics all in there, and then you just fill out the additional.
Oh, I mean, you guys really have worked hard about making this really accessible for the new player. I mean, that's awesome. my son who's 9 would be able to pick something like that up
Yeah.
pretty much and be able to kind of join in with the rest of us. Because that's where I think a lot of people kind of, when they're first starting, they kind of get a little bit too stuck in their own head, is trying to get all that out after reading it. And that's definitely a good option that you guys have put out there. That's amazing. And now for the DM, I see you guys have an amazing
Yes,
screen.
we do. So I'm gonna unfold this. So this is a 4-panel landscape, wide and not super tall, so you can like still reach over it pretty easily, see your players more easily. GM screen, a beautiful original piece of art just made for this screen, and it's nice kind of hard cover stock. And on the inside, you can see it's got some of the conditions of the game, a rundown of the actions. It's got guidelines for setting DCs if you need to make up a check on the fly. Someone's trying to climb that wall, and it'll have the information for like, here's how to quickly estimate a DC for things. And some nice art on the interior, so you can have some nice things to look at instead of. Well,
there's the goblin again. He's my favorite.
Yeah, he's kind of full of arrows in that picture, so he's not doing super great right there. But he's going to survive, I think.
We just need the cleric.
And the cleric is on this side, trying to hold off a dragon. So
that's tough work.
She'll come help him soon.
Yes.
So yeah, these are all available in retail stores. The other accessory I have here is the combat pad.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
This is
built for Pathfinder, but any game that has kind of a cycle of initiative can use this game. This pad. It's magnetic and dry erase, so you can fill out the monsters and the PCs and then erase them really easily. It's got some special tracking things. So, for instance, if the cleric doesn't want to take her turn, you can slide her over to show that she's delaying. And then you can remember that. It's really easy to remember it visually throughout the round. If something bad happens, say the fighter gets attacked a couple times by this Hydra, you can also track how close they are to dying by using these kind of skull columns here and see how bad a trouble they're in.
And that way the DM doesn't have to keep asking, and he can also put that up, and the players can know exactly where everyone's at.
Sure can. And they're also really easy to move the magnets around. So if Kyra says, well, I delayed, but I want to come back in and heal Valeros, you can just really quickly just slide her down into position in her new initiative.
Okay.
It also has several bars for conditions. So if someone has like the frightened condition, you can just write that on here and just stick it right on their placard there, and then you can move them around and keep the condition with them. And we also have a set of arrows so you can kind of track various things.
Yes.
And we've got a duration tracker here and a lot of space for notes.
The theme I'm seeing, convenience and simplicity. I like that.
Yeah.
That is a great theme to have for a tabletop role-playing game.
Yeah, and all you need to play the game is the core rulebook.
Yes.
If you want to run the game, this has everything you need to run the game as a GM, and then you'll probably also want the bestiary to have all the monsters.
Right.
These are also available online. There's a site called Archives of Nethys, and it has all these rules online as well. So if you've decided you want to just try out Pathfinder before you buy the book, you can get the rules there. If you want to run out of this book and just collect monsters off the PRD, they're all on there, including their art. Which is something we hadn't done before in first edition, so now you can really get all that information there.
Okay.
Having the book is, of course, great. It's a beautiful book, but if you really want to just like, I'm going to try out Pathfinder, you can just go online and get all that stuff for free.
Okay. Well, now I know last year you guys had the play test that you had released in the second edition. So what can the people that had purchased the play test and played it, and now you guys released the finalized second edition, can you explain to them what the differences are between the two, like what really ended up changing?
Yeah. So the things we were really like, we have to make sure these work. That's stuff like the action economy, that's stuff like character progression. Those things were really liked. There were a few like, we would like it better if you did this, and we made a few adjustments to those, but like the core of it was really popular. And so that's the main thing, is like, okay, we can, this edition, breathe a sigh of relief, this edition is going to be good. The rest of the stuff was the things that people didn't like, we were able to fix. So for example, the proficiencies I talked about earlier, they followed kind of a different and smaller scale. and people weren't finding that satisfying. So we found a way to use a different scale that is kind of more impactful in the final version. So that's like one of the changes we make. We also had a system for using magic items called Resonance. That was kind of an experimental system, and we put that in there. It was really one of the things we got to do with that playtest was kind of say like, well, here's something we could do. We really don't know if it'll work. If we were just going to a final book, there's a lot of things we might not have even tried. But because this is a playtest, we're going to go with kind of our most out there idea and see if it sticks. Because we always know we can scale it back to the other one for the final if it's something that's not really working right. And so that resonance system was something that wasn't quite working right. So the final magic items are kind of more similar to the way they used to work in first edition. And the tracking's easier. We found it was just a little too kind of fiddly, a little too much bookkeeping for people.
Okay.
And it felt a little too punishing. And so we've kind of switched that around to make it really more satisfying.
I think it's a beautiful thing when a company can really reach out to the players and be like, here, this is just the play test, and please give us your feedback, and then bring out a finalized product that's literally, I mean, you designed it, but it's pretty much built by the players, correct? It's a lot of it's the player input, correct?
Yeah, and one of the things we did is we did a really far more intensive playtest with this than we've done with anything before. Most of our playtests, we kind of would put the books out there, and then we would monitor our message boards and social media and that kind of stuff and see what people were saying and make changes based on that. This time we did a wide series of surveys, so we got actual like really good data and metrics about what people thought of the different parts of the game. So it wouldn't just be kind of what we could glean from what people are saying, but we would get opinions of people who might not necessarily have written a message board post. Either like, it's too much work to go make a message board account and engage on there, or I'm going to say something that seems like it's not very popular. I don't really want to say that on a public forum. So this kind of gave a chance for us to have really good data, which has really vastly improved the game.
It seems like more organized criticism is and input is what it seems like. Like you guys are taking it in, and it's a little bit more organized and not so internet just bundled up all over the place, and that's awesome.
Not quite as scattered, and we could really say like, here's the things we're looking at right now, and we could direct questions to those. So that we didn't kind of have to try to manually filter out all that information from among all the other posts.
Awesome. So I know you guys just released this during Gen Con. Is it only available right now at Gen Con, or where else can the fans or the new players that want to play find this?
All those products that I have already talked about, those are all available on Piazo.com. They're available at your local hobby store if they've ordered them. Or you can ask them to special order it. The Fall of Plague Stone is actually sold out here at Gen Con, but it might be in your local store.
Okay. So it's going to be popular.
Yeah. Well, the core rulebook, I believe, is like sold out on Amazon the last time I checked.
Oh yeah. The play test I know was difficult to get a hold of at one point because it was it would fly off our local gaming store shelf quickly, and they were constantly having to reorder from you guys.
So we're really happy at how quickly the game is moving, how well it's doing, and everybody I've talked to who has played it has been really satisfied. Early reviews are great, so we're happy with all that. And yeah, you can get all those at your store. We also have one more book that's going to come out very soon, which is the Lost Omens World Guide. That's more about our setting of Galarian, which also has a chapter in this book, which I'll flip to that as well. But that'll give you kind of more information about our setting, and it also has some new character options that are more closely tied to our world.
Okay.
Most of the ones in here are like, a fighter could kind of work in any setting. If you're making your own setting, if you're playing in a fictional setting that you really like, you can use that. And then the stuff in that book is more like, here are very specific, like these are the Lion Blades of Taldor, they're tied to the nation of Taldor, they're more specific to the world.
Right.
So it'll get you some more options out there, and if you are running a game in Galarian, it's going to give you some stuff that's really thematically tied to that.
Okay.
So I'm just going to kind of prop that one up. So this is the section on our setting. It's got a map of kind of the primary region where most of the adventures take place.
Very bright map too, not difficult to see at all. That is.
And then the World Guide has a poster map.
Okay.
For a little more detail. It has some of the regions of the world, each of which has a really nice write-up and a nice piece of art to kind of set the scene. And then after that, it's got some information about kind of some of the people. So these are the different cultures of the world, from the Gurundi, from kind of the north end of the southern continent, to some of the folks from, like there's the Vudra, which is a distant nation, but it's got kind of a colony near the main land, so you can have the Vudran people there. There's just a lot of kind of interesting color to kind of look in a step deeper into some of these cultures. So you're like, well, I'm a human, but what else? What culture am I from? Because that's going to inform how you role play and some of the things you know. Also a section on creatures, like what are giants like in the world of Golarion, and how do they interact with other people? We also talk about factions, and then kind of the last big section is on the religions, and these are going to have some mechanical things for, like, if you're a cleric, you're going to worship a certain deity. It's going to have that information here. And there's domains, which are tied to the deities, and go to one of their portfolios. So, for example, the goddess of the sun has the fire domain. So if you worship her, you can get some fire spells and that kind of thing.
Awesome.
This is also great stuff for if you decide to make your own deities, for you're making your own setting.
What?
This is all the stuff you can just follow this template and you can make your own deities. And
Oh, I've never heard of anything like that. That is really cool, because I know people out there have amazing imaginations, and that's going to be probably something that I think a lot of the people I know that play are just going to run with that.
And there's also there are also a whole bunch of deities in Golarion already. So if there's one of those you like, and they're not in this book because this is just kind of the most worshipped, the main ones.
Right.
You'll have a lot of tools here to build them out from scratch as well. And we really put some effort into kind of changing the system from first edition, because the deities kind of had a set rubric for how you got abilities from them, and we kind of want to say, well, we want to make it more individual to each of the deities, so they're really fulfilling their full theme, because there were some kind of mismatches in first edition that we've cleared up, and kind of made it more specific to those deities.
So, besides the release this weekend of the second edition, I hear there's some new things coming to Piazo, or coming out from Piazo.
Well, we have we've announced several new products. One of those is the one we already have announced is the Game Mastery Guide, which is going to be the toolbox for building your own campaigns, building your own monsters. It's going to have a whole bunch more detail. This has everything you need to run the game and some information on building a game. That's really where you go when it's like, I'm going to prepare, I'm going to build my own world, I'm going to introduce variant rules to my game, I'm going to make a bunch of monsters. All that information is in the Game Mastery Guide. We've also announced the Advanced Player's Guide that's going to come up. It's going to feature, I believe, 10 new ancestries, different options like orcs, kobolds, catfolk, a whole bunch of different options for your characters, and 4 new classes. And those
You guys are working hard.
We certainly are. And we're going to do a playtest for that Advanced Player's Guide as well, as we do with a lot of our books that introduce new classes.
Oh, I can't wait.
We're going to have 4 new classes, and those are the Witch, the Oracle, the Swashbuckler, and the Investigator. And those were all classes that were in first edition that were really popular and play in different ways. So like the Investigator is going to be your first chance to kind of be like, I want to be the Sherlock Holmes of the world.
Right.
And the Witch has really interesting spells and kind of plays a lot differently than the other spellcasters. So we're looking forward to people getting to try those out in early playtests and then in the final version. That book's also going to just have a lot more expansion. It's like, I've looked at all the spells in this book. I want some more spells. It's going to have a bunch more spells. It's going to be our big book that kind of expands a whole bunch of rules options.
Fantastic. Well, Logan, there's so much more on the table, and we could probably talk all day long about Pathfinder and the game and what else and all the other things that you're discussing, because I feel like we didn't even get to spend that much time on what's coming. I mean, all of this is fantastic. For anybody that's maybe in their hotel room or kind of just relaxing and watching, and they're already here at Gen Con, where can they find you?
We are kind of the very front corner of the exhibit hall on row 1 through 4, basically, the big purple booth.
And can they play while they're here too?
Yeah, right next to our booth we have a demo area, and you can go there, and if they have an open spot right then, they'll seat you. If not, I believe they are taking reservations for slots as well.
So if
it's
you're
about
here,
an hour demo.
Yeah, if you're here and you've never played, right now is the time to do it. You have till tomorrow, it's Sunday, you know.
And if you're like a lot of the people, you're going to go straight from that demo area right to the booth and pick up your books.
Exactly. Well, Logan, I just want to tell you thank you so much for all the information and your time and your work. which is gorgeous. I definitely appreciate you coming out here and talking to me and talking to everybody out on Twitch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much, guys, and you all have a great day, and I will see you later. Thanks for joining in. Bye.